generally try not to make 2 videos in 1 week that cover similar news, and in case you weren't aware, we also try to plan our videos a little in advance in order to ensure there's some breathing room for the editorial team, and also some variety for you all. In fact, we also try not to cover similar topics in a given week. But this week, we have failed spectacularly, with my video on Monday about repurposing and reverse engineering a not really properly functioning juice box charging station, and then Kate's video on Wednesday about charging networks being acquired and sometimes destroyed from within at an alarming rate. And apparently this week is all about charging, because the world has conspired against us, and there's another charging-related news story that's just too hot to put on the back burner, too pressing to ignore, and I should also note, changing at a pretty rapid rate. So this is definitely one of those kind of videos that we hope will be relevant for a long time, but unlikely will be. Yep, that's right. We're going to talk about Tesla's Supercharger Network and the news midweek that Tesla has laid off the majority of its Supercharger team. Coming hot on the heels of the publication of the video about network acquisitions and the metaphorical poop fest that is public charging, there's been a lot of questions raised by you all, and so I'm going to try and answer some of them. And yes, instead of going live on a Friday as we'd normally do with our 3rd video in the week, this one is going live a whole day early because things are changing at quite the clip. So grab your helmet and strap in. Tesla has, for a really long time, stood apart from the rest of the auto industry when it comes to fast charging of electric cars. While the majority of automakers maintain that fast charging, for the most part, was someone else's problem, Tesla was building out its global network of superchargers, offering its customers convenient, reliable, and easy-to-use charging infrastructure that usually just worked. Unlike other charging networks, which relied on third-party providers to design and build the charging stations they used, Tesla brought everything in-house, reducing costs and ensuring that for Tesla customers, the experience was second to none. Instead of designing charging cabinets from scratch, those early superchargers used the very same charging modules found inside every production Tesla. But instead of just one, it placed multiple charging modules in parallel inside each unit, giving supercharger sites increased redundancy, reduced repair costs, and Tesla a massively reduced cost of manufacture. And for years, Tesla has been placed on something of a pedestal by EV fans and owners. Some would argue quite rightly. While charging used to come complimentary with every Tesla, today's owners have a similarly seamless experience to early Model S pioneers other than paying for it, thanks to a completely integrated payment system that matches your Tesla's hardware ID to your payment method of choice. There are no screens, no buttons, and absolutely no RFID cards. You just rock up, plug in, and charge. That's not to say Tesla's supercharger technology hasn't had issues, because it has. Failures do happen, but for the most part, because Tesla owns and operates the network, it's always been able to repair sites and get them back to operational status far more quickly than other charging networks that don't have a vertically integrated manufacturing and support chain. Thanks to European regulations over charging standards, Tesla's supercharger network in Europe has used CCS Type 2 inlets for years, meaning Europeans watching this can view Tesla superchargers as just another provider of CCS Type 2 charging in a wide and varied marketplace. In the US, Canada, and a few other select markets where the auto industry initially chose CCS Type 1 as its connector of choice, and where the resulting lack of competition has meant that CCS Type 1 fast chargers have had a bit of a poor reputation when it comes to reliability, we've witnessed a revolt, followed by pretty much every mainstream automaker, and now their intent to relegate CCS Type 1 to the history books and instead to adopt Tesla's NACS standard, known previously as Tesla's Supercharger connector, as their preferred charging standard of choice from here on out. Those announcements, first by Ford, then GM, and then pretty much every other major automaker selling in North America, came with a promise that respective EV owners from each of these brands would eventually gain access to Tesla's Supercharger network, first with special Tesla-approved NACS to CCS Type 1 adapters, and then later on using dedicated NACS inlets on future model year cars. We have talked about this transition in phenomenal detail on this channel, and so I'm not going to rehash things here. Suffice to say, we have detailed some of the challenges, talked about some of our concerns, and more recently explained how to go about using Tesla's network if you're someone who owns a non-Tesla EV that has been granted access to superchargers. I'll link to all of those videos in the show notes, and we're also going to go ahead and make a special playlist concerning all of our supercharger-related charging videos. So far, the transition to NACS has appeared reasonably smooth. There have been a few hiccups for sure, but for the most part, those who I've met with Ford and Rivian EVs, the only two non-Tesla brands allowed to use Tesla superchargers in the US at the time of filming, have had generally positive experiences, with the only major gripe being the shortness of cable length at some V3 supercharger sites. Given that Tesla's Supercharger network is experiencing a rise in custom as a consequence, and that the very same network will make road trips less stress-inducing, you'd think that Tesla would be all out on taking the win and expanding its Supercharger team, helping speed up the transition to NACS, helping rival firms adopt NACS as their preferred standard, and perhaps even gobbling up additional funding where possible to expand the network. Except midweek, and yes, this is the point in the video where I give you our take on what's happening, Tesla laid off its 500-strong charging team. With a few exceptions, and based on the reporting currently available, it really is just a few people who are now working in different departments at the automaker that have nothing to do with charging. Elon Musk decided that Tesla's entire EV charging team was surplus to requirements, and future EV charging deployment will be... well, at this time, we don't know. Elon Musk has given some pretty vague indications about company restructuring and has stated publicly in a post on X that, quote, Tesla still plans to grow the Supercharger network, just at a slower pace for new locations and more focus on 100% uptime and expansion of existing locations, end quote. Electrek reported on Wednesday that, quote, sources familiar with the matter believe that some of the layoffs have nothing to do with hiring inefficiencies or restructuring, but rather with Musk throwing his weight around Tesla, end quote. It cited multiple sources within the firm that claim the firing of Tesla's entire EV charging team, which included Rebecca Tinucci, Tesla's senior director of EV charging, was partly because she was, quote, fighting back pressure from Musk to fire a bigger percentage of her team, and the CEO decided to let go of the entire team as an example, end quote. By all accounts, everything seems to be a little bit messy. I've heard of locations that were due to get superchargers finding out that their contracts have suddenly been cancelled, rendering locations that thought they had a pending supercharger lease ready to go without anything. Moreover, some of those locations are in areas where Tesla's Supercharger network is already struggling under demand. Several of them are in New York, for example, where fewer Tesla owners have access to off-street parking and charging, and where rideshare companies like Lyft and Uber encourage their drivers to get behind the wheel of a Tesla because of the lower costs of ownership when compared to gasoline vehicles. In some cases, those new sites were reportedly already going through preparatory groundwork to ensure they had the required power and space allocated for supercharging. Some had even had that completed. My LinkedIn page is full of people who once had a job at Tesla and no longer do, none of which, of course, can talk publicly about what has happened because legal reasons. But given Tesla's charging team is supposed to be working with multiple stakeholders outside of the company to open up its Supercharger network to non-Teslas, this announcement isn't just a bombshell. It's a metaphorical nuclear detonation into the heart of the EV industry. And here's why. First, Without any staff to help the official SAE transition process, it's going to be hard for non-Tesla companies to work with Tesla, or indeed the SAE, to ensure that their vehicles meet the J3400 standards as implemented right now by Tesla's Supercharger sites. And that could be a major hurdle to speeding up the EV transition to NACS, as I've met plenty of people who have sworn off buying a new EV until that NACS transition is in fact complete. I know at this point that there will be plenty of people who look at this and say, aha, but J3400 is already a standard with the SAE that doesn't require much input from Tesla, and in theory, on paper, you're probably right. In practice, however, there are a whole host of different ways a standard can be interpreted. And while Tesla may have originally penned the standard, a standard which was later interpreted and ratified by the SAE, there will be tiny differences between how the SAE document lays this all out and how Tesla's internal engineering teams treat that very same standard. Someone, somewhere within the industry, will have questions for Tesla regarding operational compatibility with other EVs. Right now, there is nobody there to answer those questions. So what happens when someone has one? The jury is currently out on that particular issue. And let's not forget that the promised GM turn-on for supercharger access, which I and many others in the industry had expected to happen in late March or early April, still hasn't happened at the beginning of May. I'm not sure if there's a change of plans at Tesla on that rollout, or if there's been another hold-up unrelated to Tesla that means GM vehicles haven't yet been given access, but it certainly does not look good. Worst still, automakers appear to be completely in the dark, as much as we all are. My contacts within the industry say they've heard nothing from Tesla on this sudden change, and they learned of it when we did. And that's incredibly worrying news. Right now, officially at least, automakers we've spoken to says that, yes, it's full steam ahead on their plans to adopt NACS, but behind the scenes, I suspect it is a very different story. At least, based on the tiny chinks of light I can see through tightly drawn curtains designed to keep press out. It's pretty clear that the EV industry is already being kicked hard. We've covered it plenty on this channel of late. Oil companies are buying up charging networks and then slowly reneging their promises on what those networks will do and how large and how comprehensive they'll be in their coverage. Media outlets that were once rosy on EVs are now turning sour on them, often because of advertiser influence or political influence from higher up in the editorial team. And automakers are replacing their EV pledges for watered-down imitations. Some are even adding EV as a suffix to any vehicle that includes some kind of electric motor capable of providing drive power. And naysayers will gleefully tell me and anyone else who will listen that EV sales are falling and nobody wants to buy EVs. Luckily, the data contradicts that. EV sales are continuing to rise. It's the rate of change in acceleration of growth that's slowing. Data and context are important. But we're now seeing a company that many of us viewed as being a cornerstone of the EV revolution changing plans, seemingly on a win, seemingly without any justification, after gaining massive trust within the industry. Some are calling it a bait and switch. I wouldn't, but I can understand why some people are feeling that way. And maybe we and other people within the EV industry are being hard on Tesla. Maybe this is hyperbole. Maybe this is part of Elon Musk's grand master plan and has been all along. But Tesla's stock and its position in the EV world aren't where they once were. Elon Musk's mission at Tesla doesn't seem as laser-focused on getting people into EVs and accelerating the transition away from fossil fuels as it once was. Instead, he seems laser-focused on autonomy, on robotics, and on going to Mars. All things that aren't making EVs more affordable and more readily available for people to own. And I know people will say, yes, but the $25,000 Tesla is coming. And just this week, Elon Musk reiterated that commitment for next year. But if you will forgive me for editorializing a massive amount, Elon Musk is currently heading straight into P.T. Barnum levels of misdirection. I do not need to rehash some of the things going on at X, or indeed any of the other companies he owns or is part of. There are plenty of other videos and news stories covering that. But from SpaceX to X, Tesla to the Boring Company, and even Neuralink, there are regular troubling stories concerning Elon Musk's management style. It appears from what we can tell, and Tesla isn't responding to media requests, that the majority of the team responsible for the Supercharger network are no longer at the company. And those who once were on the project who have managed to retain employment are no longer working on Supercharger or charging. This means nobody to help expand the network, nobody to help deal with existing customer issues, or in fact help other automakers transition to NACS. We can hope that this situation is a transitory one. Hopefully, there will be a new staff that come online quickly to help rebuild Tesla's Supercharger team and EV charging team. But I also know that such a process will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to require a learning period, and that's going to delay the NACS transition. It's going to put hundreds of future charging projects on hold. And it's likely going to leave automakers, customers, and both future and existing EV drivers wondering what on earth is going to happen next. So, what can we do? Honestly, while I think the answer isn't clear-cut, I think there's a kind of a path forward. First, and some people won't like this, be vocal, get active, talk to your local lawmakers about the need for public EV charging networks, one that aren't owned by one particular company. Ask what their take on the Tesla situation is, and ask tough questions. After all, Tesla has received US federal funding for its Supercharger network. Where does this sudden change of plan leave that? And what does this all mean for the future of equitable EV charging? Next, and this is important, we need to highlight the infrastructure that exists and works today. I have read what feels like hundreds of comments from people discussing their day-to-day use of non-Tesla charging infrastructure. And yes, while there are admittedly some terrible reliability issues at some sites and across some networks, overall things do appear to be improving. I've personally driven from coast to coast in the US in a Chevrolet Bolt EV with 50 kilowatt DC fast charging. I've driven a 170 kilowatt DC fast charging capable F-150 Lightning with a trailer and a car on the back from Portland, Oregon to Denver, Colorado. I didn't get stranded. I didn't run out of charge. Of course, there are horror stories, but just like those battery fire horror stories, the running out of charge and being stranded stories are the ones that grab our attention, the edge cases that excite the news machine. They excite that news machine far more than the thousands of successful trips that make everyday life with an EV a reality for an increasingly large number of people today. We also need to address the issue assuming that the grass is always greener on the other side. Many people out there today could easily have their needs met by a non-Tesla EV, using level 2 charging overnight or the occasional fast charging session. Our fixation as an industry and a community on Tesla's Supercharger network isn't actually helpful for the industry. And if you are in the EV industry, you should be working along with us to fix the problems we currently have, not just jumping ship to a grassing greener outlook only to be met with another set of problems. And we need to stop putting companies and individuals on pedestals. We need to call them out on their bovine byproduct. And we need to push back when a company CEO starts to lean heavily into the my way or else mentality, which frankly Elon Musk reached a long time ago, and many of us have enabled that behaviour. I ultimately believe that NACS will become a US charging standard, but I have also from day one cautioned about the risks associated with transitioning without properly setting up ground rules and answering basic questions, like what happens when a company behind that standard decides to fire its entire staff? At the end of the day, I honestly don't care what the connector is on the end of the charging station. I care about reliability, affordability, and the building of a non-monopolised, effective charging network. I've worried for a really long time that switching to NACS would cause the latter, and I hope that this week's news hasn't proven that fear true. But I know for sure it's just given a whole bunch of ammunition to naysayers of EVs as a whole. This feels like an intentional sabotage of one of the best bits of the EV world, not by someone outside of the industry, but by someone at the very heart of it, for reasons that appear to be, well, all the wrong ones. Tesla won its bid to become the standard for charging in North America. It almost has a monopoly on NACS-based charging right now. That could help it dominate the EV charging landscape for many years. And while I personally detest monopolies, it is frankly incomprehensible that Tesla is choosing to cull its charging team when it has the largest potential for growth, instead shifting and focusing on self-driving cars and robotics instead. Many of you in the comments section have called this the classic definition of bait and switch. I'm not sure I buy that wholeheartedly, but I can certainly understand why so many people are feeling like that. And at the end of the day, this is bad news for everyone who drives an EV. Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people that help make this channel possible by funding it through Patreon and YouTube, covering our bills, paying our team, and making sure we can be 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed here, just follow the links below. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for, from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, $10.08 a year. A massive welcome to our newest supporters, Ralph Koenig, Mr. Eldritch, Dwayne Adiger, and Corey Singletray. To join our list and get your shout out, become a paid Patreon member for your week of fame. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll also find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. The address is listed below. And of course, if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store link in the down below as well. This month, we are celebrating Wrangling EV FUD with a fantastic t-shirt design by our in-house artist and animator, Erin. Get yours today by heading to our Redbubble store. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we also think that this one is well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving.